My wife looked me in the eye and said, "I should have married my ex." So I left a note that ended it all and walked away from 8 years of marriage. It happened in Denver, Colorado, on a typical Tuesday night. The kind of night that blends in with hundreds of others. It is quiet, it is predictable, and nothing stands out. While neither of us was actually paying attention, leftovers sat on the counter, the dishwasher hummed in the background, and the television played low. After 8 years of marriage, our default setting had become one of comfort. Rachel was at the table across from me, scrolling endlessly on her phone with her thumb. She only moved her food around with her fork, as if eating had become a chore. She barely touched her food. It didn't really bother me. We'd been through periods of silence before, when we couldn't talk much, but routine kept us going. That, I told myself, is how long-term relationships should be. Fireworks are not required every night. You just need a steady person to sit across from. But then she said it out of nowhere. She even gave the impression that she was addressing the weather in her casual, flat voice. I'll never forget the weight of the words, though. I sometimes wonder if I did the right thing by marrying you. I've never felt so stuck before with Mark. Mark was her ex-boyfriend, and I had only heard snippets about him over the years. The man she dated prior to our meeting. The one who lived for mountain climbing, weekend road trips, and a string of stories that always seemed bigger than life. Because I believed that she had chosen me, I never gave him much thought. I believed that decision to be permanent. As I stared at her across the table, I froze, my fork barely touching my lips. She didn't flinch, and I honestly thought I had misheard her at first. She didn't act guilty, mumble, or rush to apologize. With a calmness that was somehow worse than anger, she simply sat there with her phone facing down on the table. I had no idea what to say. Nothing came out of my mind as it spun. I kept waiting for her to laugh it off, which would have softened the blow. I didn't mean it that way, but I didn't say anything. The silence grew longer. The dishwasher's low hum behind me was the only sound. It was one of those moments when time seems to go on forever and at the same time, where nothing changes, but the outside world continues to move as if nothing happened. When I looked at her, the woman with whom I had built a life, I realized that at that moment I didn't recognize her. I wanted to find out why. Why she would say that and bring up a man who hadn't been a part of her life in nearly a decade. But I couldn't get the words out. Instead, I just sat there, tightening my chest as the air in the room suddenly felt heavier. My silence almost made her lean back in her chair when she finally did. She then added additional, more profound phrases. Words that would make a single heartbreaking sentence into something I couldn't get out of. However, that part came after only a few exhalations. Mark. I couldn't wave away the smoke of his name in the air. I figured she might end there because she might have realized how mean the words had been. She didn't, though. For the first time all night, Rachel looked directly at me after putting her fork down and putting her plate down. Her tone was steady, and she said, "You're too safe, too predetermined. If I hadn't settled, I sometimes believe my life would be more exciting." Settled. I was more affected by that word than Mark's name. It wasn't just a passing remark. It was done in advance. She wanted it to be heard by me. She wanted me to know that, in her eyes, our relationship was more of a compromise that she regretted than a partnership. I tried to connect the woman in front of me with the one who used to laugh until she wept at stupid inside jokes as I stared at her, who used to kiss me in the kitchen because they heard a song. That woman died out somewhere along the way and was replaced by someone who could say these things without hesitation. "Do you believe that this is about excitement?" I inquired quietly. Even the sound of my voice was not like mine. As if we were talking about a show that Rachel had grown tired of. Rachel shrugged. "I'm not sure. Simply, I feel stuck. I was never made to feel that way by Mark. He was adventurous and impulsive. I didn't have to worry about the future as much when I was with him. Life happened by itself. With you, routine and planning are always present." She spoke with a clinical detachedness, as if she had decided that this was the night to let go of them after holding on to them for months. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, and to remind her of the numerous ways I had been there when adventure would have been irrelevant. such as when her mother was ill and I spent nights at the hospital. When we finally saved enough money to go on her dream trip to Italy. When I was responsible for ensuring that our life was stable enough for us both to breathe. However, the truth was that none of that seemed to matter right now. I was not a partner in her eyes. She never wanted a safety net like me. I said to Rachel slowly, "Be careful. Are you saying that you think you've settled down?" She did not respond immediately. She nodded after focusing first on the table and then on me. I suspect that I did. That was it. Only the truth, or at least her version of it, without hesitation or softening. With the weight of 8 years pressing down on me, I sat back in my chair. All of our little concessions, agreements, and plans. It seemed like everything was falling apart. Not only the confession, but also how unassuming she made it sound, as if it were just an inconvenient truth that she finally decided to say out loud, surprised me. She continued, "You're a good man," leaning forward and putting her elbows on the table. Be that as it may, good does not necessarily imply exciting. In addition, there are times when I wonder if excitement was always what I wanted. I had no idea what to say about that. Because what do you say when the person with whom you have built your life tells you they are sorry they chose you? As the silence returned, I sat there still. But something had already changed inside. Also, it wasn't rage. No, not yet. I didn't anticipate having to make a decision as a result of something deeper and quieter. I couldn't get the settled thoughts out of my head. Like the faint hum of that dishwasher in the background, it kept coming back to me. 8 years. 8 years of making a life for ourselves. 8 years of working through hospital stays. 8 years of planning trips she said she wanted. 8 years of building something I thought we both valued. A single word had changed everything at this point. Settled. I was not overcome with rage. It was not violent or loud. It was quieter and heavier, as if something had been ripped out of me in one blow. I realized I had 2 options after staring at my water glass, where condensation was dripping down the sides. I could argue, plead, and try to show that I was sufficient. Alternately, I could accept that nothing I said would alter her internal decision. But then a third option presented itself, one that I had no idea I would choose. That night I didn't fight. I didn't run away. I didn't even say anything. I chose, on the other hand, to let the silence bear the weight that she didn't seem to feel. Finally, Rachel got up, said something about being worn out, and left the room. I remained at the table, staring at the fridge-mounted note cards that reminded us of the bills and grocery lists that she now considered a mistake. I felt like I had snapped that night as I lay beside her in her bed as she scrolled through her phone in the pitch black. However, it was not the kind of break that could be fixed with promises or apologies. It was the end. I went through the motions for the next few days. Dinner, work, and small talk. However, I was planning underneath. I couldn't stay in a house where I was treated like a prize for getting through it. I quietly packed a bag that Friday because she thought I was working late. Only the essentials. Clothing, documents, and sufficient supplies to last a while. My share was moved into a separate account I had opened earlier that day after I logged into our joint bank account and closed it. There was no shouting, no heated argument, just deliberate, subdued behavior. I went back into the kitchen one last time before I left, right where she had spoken the words that broke us. After a while of standing there, I took out a notepad from the drawer. I did not compose paragraphs. I did not elaborate on who I was. I only added one line. You might find the adventure you're looking for with Mark. After placing the note on the counter and placing my keys next to it, I silently left. It felt like a weight that I had been carrying for years was finally lifted when the door closed behind me. There wasn't any dramatic music or an exhilarating rush. Instead, there was a steady, peaceful end. I didn't look back at the house as I drove away. I did not have to. That part of my life had come to an abrupt end, and I was aware of that. I felt free for the first time in years in that silence. My phone lit up with call after call the following morning. I initially let it ring. I turned it off for the 5th time and placed it face down on the nightstand of the Rockies cabin I had rented. The night before, I had arrived there past midnight. The long drive was strangely quiet. With a view of the mountains in the distance, The tiny cabin was hidden among the trees. I didn't feel suffocated by the silence around me for the first time in years. Felt like breathing room. As I was unpacking, Rachel's first voicemail came through. As she demanded to know where I was, her voice cracked. The second was more enraged, accusing me of being dramatic and fleeing rather than speaking. She was crying by the third, her words slipping between gasps. She stated, "I didn't mean it that way. What I said is being twisted by you. Please return home. This can be fixed. We can tackle it. I can't afford to lose you." The problem is that she actually meant it. You don't tell your husband of 8 years that he's the mistake, the sure thing, and the one you settled for by accident. That kind of language does not just appear. They are ingrained in you long before you say them. The messages piled up over the next few hours. Some are irate, some are desperate, and others are quiet and broken. I did not, however, feel any compulsion to reverse the vehicle as I listened. I once would have held on to any hint of affection or promise of trying again. But when she said settled, that time had come to an end. Irony almost seemed cruel. She wanted excitement, adventure, and spontaneity for a long time. Nevertheless, the most unpredictability I had ever displayed was my silent departure. I sat outside the cabin with a coffee in hand and thought about what had transpired as the sun set over the mountains that evening. There was no shocking betrayal, no affair that was caught on camera. Unlike the stories you hear from friends or read online, my marriage did not end in a fireball. With a single sentence, it vanished over a meal of reheated leftovers. Sometimes all it takes is that. The realization that the person to whom you gave your best was never satisfied is the only scandal or lie. I did not return her phone calls. I did not respond to her text messages. I had nothing else to say, not because I wanted to retaliate against her. I had offered my own perspective after she had stated her truth. A note on the counter and silence. I finally felt something I hadn't felt in a long time as I lay in the cabin's small bed that night. Peace. People believe that lengthy discussions, apologies, and explanations lead to closure. However, sometimes closure simply consists of realizing that you chose yourself over the other person. Rachel wanted to travel. She wouldn't ever again find me waiting at the dinner table, fork in hand, ready to keep proving my worth, though she might find it. Turned out to be the loudest choice I've ever made to walk away quietly. I am grateful that you stuck around to the end. Make sure to subscribe and check back for more content.